There.
Wow.
It's generating something here.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
live. Mine's being. Oh, there we go. We're going live in all the places. This is very exciting for people watching this in the future.
Let's see if it's. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
Oh, officially.
Now we're official.
We're official. So I'm Vivi Henriette of the ZODIAC. For those watching the video, there is a name tag. And I'm here with Rose Blakelock, Mutable Cross.
It's true.
I made this. It would be really funny if it was false.
It would be very bizarre, but now I'm like, oh, let me get profesh here.
It is Pisces season, Mercury in Pisces season. I can just start saying lies about you. Like,
it's true.
Former clown, which could be true. I don't know. Have you ever performed in the circus?
I mean, one could argue that my entire 20s was a clown performance. So it depends on who you ask and how you ask it.
Yeah. My friend, there's a type of comedy called clown, which I know nothing about. You might. And my friend Barbara goes to clown church once a month. Barbara, also an astrologer.
And once again, you could call several churches clown church, depending on who you ask and how you ask them.
Now we're getting somewhere.
You should know I do have Mercury in Pisces, so
it's
my time. Yes.
I for some reason I feel like it's very invasive when I ask people to interview them. I don't ask for their charts because I kind of just want to figure it out with them. It just feels a little more.
Yeah, and there's also as a practicing astrologer, you and I probably both know the way that we'll clock a chart and then kind of your brain will start going, which it's a good exercise in conversation and also in readings to slow down that mechanism a little bit. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna hop on that Mercury and Pisces though, and I have some big feelings about the PR campaign from Mercury and Pisces. I feel like we're doing a really bad job. I'd like to know your thoughts about personal feelings, but also the sort of reputation this signature has.
There's that quote that's if you take a ballet dancer and try to make them play football, they'll spend their life thinking they're a failure. And I think it's the same thing with Mercury and Pisces. We are here to write poetry, to interpret charts, to speak in song and create riddles for the rest of the world to try to figure out. We are not here to stick to the facts or read you charts and data. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that.
Lean in, because
I do feel I agree with that absolutely. And I also feel that I don't know why I've been so hung up on this, but it's the first word is poet out of everyone's lips, usually mine as well. And I just feel like I have feelings towards poetry. There's some poetry I like. There's a lot of poetry I don't like. And it's almost as if you're setting us up for failure. Oh, you're not a poet or a fine artist. Maybe you failed. Maybe you're not Mercury and Pisces enough.
I mean, that's true, right? I guess I set a trap in trying to relieve us from one or escape one. And you're right. I would say that we have these for every placement, right? Capricorn moon, how many people are withholding, stoic, you know what I mean? So there's a way where we have these knee-jerk associations and stereotypes can be really damaging and harmful and flattening, and also can be true enough times that we can't ignore them. So I guess it is a balance, right? But it's words are a wash with Mercury and Pisces, it just is.
I mean, it is a mute signature, to be fair. Literally. But also, okay, I'm gonna get to the sort of crux of my big issue here.
Yes.
Mine's bearing with me, and I haven't even introduced you proper yet, but that's okay. We're gonna get to that.
It's fine. We're feeling our way there.
We are. This is very Mercury and Pisces. We're gonna sort of go this slow route. So, okay, Capricorn moon, right? What Capricorn moon, Venus and Virgo, right? Pick your Sun in
Pick
Libra,
your fall.
yeah, pick your fall, right? Whatever sort of difficult placement you have, there's usually the like, oh, that must be so hard
Mm.
on you. It must be so hard to just work all the time and not be able to like really just like feel love, or you just need to shine brighter, or let me teach you how to sun. But like Mercury and Pisces, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't think straight. Ha ha ha. Like no one ever has compassion for us.
Yeah, and I think part of that it is just the like prevailing dominant social or like we break all the rules and we don't care,
Yeah.
I think. But I think there's also just a like people don't have there's like such an obsession with the illusion of linearity, and Mercury and Pisces like just turns that on its head so quickly that I think that it's just like either you have to kind of break out of some kind of dominant cultural narrative to appreciate it. Whereas like the things that we like bemoan, right? The Capricorn moon or whatever, or the Libra sun, it's like still kind of benefits and like fits into this, right? Like making yourself smaller, thinking about other people is a great way to be exploited. Not not prioritizing your feelings or your interior experience is a great way to be exploited.
Yeah.
Thinking you'd rather like sit with the flowers all day makes that a little harder, you know?
Oh, I like that. So it's the sort of dominant cultural narrative that's really coming down hard on Mercury and Pisces.
I think
It's the
so because it's like a way of being in fall that like doesn't, and kind of the same thing with Mars and Cancer, right? Like
Mm,
to be motivated by care for the most vulnerable, it's like
yeah,
not doesn't really work so well, right?
totally. Yeah.
So
I like this new way of thinking. Thank you for this spin.
I
I
am
didn't
here to spin.
you also have Mars and Cancer, may I ask?
No, I don't. I have an Aries Mars actually. So
Oh, me too.
shut up. Are we the same person? Do we have the same chart? Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
To be guessed. Yeah.
We're gonna find out, I guess, one way
Mhm.
or another.
Do you I could introduce you now if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
So I made a big deal out of like reading the official, but people can find it on the line. They can read the official bio, but I'm going to say
Sure.
Rose Blakelock, you are an astrologer, a
Mhm,
musician, and a
mhm.
podcaster. And I feel like there's already a lot of things that I've missed. What do we add to this?
Oh, I'm like a semi-retired carpenter,
Okay.
builder. When I have to, I do that work, and when I can avoid it, I do that as well. Beyond that, I'm a real mountain les these days, just
Yeah.
hanging
So
out in the mountains. What were you
do
gonna
you
say?
like I would say like so you're outside of Santa Fe? Where are you? Like where in the mountains?
Yeah. We're off the high road between Taos and Santa Fe. So just like we're in a 400-person town, there is a post office and like a fire station. And lots of lovely people. But it's like very, I lived in New York City for 12 years and then
Yeah.
lost my shit and moved to the mountains with my partner 3.5 years ago. And so that's what we've been doing.
Do you that like do you grow things? Like what do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, I grew a lot of weed this year.
Okay.
But we also my partner's an herbalist and a breathwork practitioner, and so
Okay.
we do a big, mostly medicinal garden only because we just aren't like ruthless or calculating enough to keep the creatures out. So it's like last year we grew a lot of kale for prairie dogs. And it's like they're very cute, and we're also like, okay, let's be real. Like we can grow your medicine, but unless we have like an enclosed greenhouse, it's just not going to work.
Fun fact, tell me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, but I think I'm right.
Yeah.
Don't prairie dogs carry like the bubonic plague?
We do
Don't
still
they?
have the plague out here. Prairie dogs can carry it, though it's usually more likely rats and mice. But yeah,
Okay.
technically you could get that. And also the hantavirus is like very prevalent, but there's measles in Florida. So, you know, you like don't need to go to the wilderness to catch
Oh,
things
I'm
we
not
thought we
saying like it's
eradicated.
there. I just thought that was like my fun like prairie dog fact is that like maybe they could have like the bubonic plague. Isn't like
No, you're right.
armadillos too? There's something like
I
armadillos carry
think
something.
so. Yeah, something like that. But
Mhm.
I did not brush up on my rodent disease factoids, unfortunately.
I got really excited. Have you ever been to NORWAC, the conference, the astrology
I
conference?
have not yet. No. Have you? Did you go?
Yeah, yeah, but there's like the parking lot and in front of there's a bunch of prairie dogs and it's like to me it's like as exciting as the conference itself is to just like watch the prairie dogs and I think that's like when I figured out the bubonic plague thing. And funny
Mhm.
enough, a friend of mine, I believe her husband like got I think it was the bubonic plague, like some sort of plague that was just like really
Yikes.
wild and like unheard of and like rare.
Ooh, I
You didn't
would.
expect this conversation, did you?
I mean, I've learned to expect the unexpected, I would say, but no, I didn't have this on my, bingo card, if you will. But did you know that prairie dogs are actually a keystone species? They're, like, super important, to the local ecology.
No.
What's her name? Terry Tempest Williams, like, has whole books about it if you ever are curious and wanna get deeper into, because there's also the whole thing where there's this, like, cultural myth that the prairie dogs dig holes that then cows trip in and break their legs, and so there's, like, ranchers who come out and, like, try to shoot them, except that prairie dogs actually help aerate the soil and spread seed and diversify what's going on there, and the only way that a cow's gonna trip in a prairie dog hole is if it's, like, factory farming and they don't have room to move. So,
Mm, that's
look
so
at
wild.
us.
So bringing it full circle, like the kale that you're feeding the prairie
Yeah.
dogs is very important because you're helping the continuation of this keystone species.
I mean, it's true because the field they live in right now was overgrazed by cattle for years, and so they really and we're in a drought still, so any kind of extra vegetation that you can provide for them, they appreciate.
I love that. How long have you been in the mountains for?
3.5 years. Yeah, moved out on Zozobra, actually, that's when we got to this house, which is like this Labor Day festival where they burn this giant puppet that you stuff all of your, like, fears, and the things that you wanna, like, leave
Yeah.
in the last year, yeah, it's kinda cool, and then they set it on fire and shoot fireworks out of it. So we, like, got here and it was, like, streaming on YouTube, and we were, like, eating Trader Joe's frozen pizza in camp chairs, just like, "What did we do?"
Wait, I've never heard of this. Is this particular to like where you live, or is this some sort of like national holiday I don't know about?
It's very much a New Mexico thing, and it was they have, the history here is, like, pretty rich and intense because it's also been, like, colonized over and over by different groups of people, um, but basically there are these religious feasts that happen around the same time, and this, like, weirdo in, like, I think the 1920s or, like, early 20th century, early 1900s, like, wanted to create a secular festival for other people to, like, celebrate, and so he came up with Zozobra, and, I'm sure that there's way more to it, and then, some people have issues with it, so I don't wanna be like, "Zozobra is amazing." It's complicated, just like everything
Yeah.
and anything here, in this country particularly, right? But it is cool to watch a giant thing kind of explode, you know?
Always. I mean, we do have various placements, so
That's true.
I love watching things explode all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I have Mars Uranus trine natally too, so it's just like, "Let's make it blow up bigger, faster, now."
Oh, wait, I do too. I always forget my placements. Yeah.
Shut
Mhm,
up, we have the same chart.
mhm,
Which also
mhm.
means that you have a very similar chart, possibly to Jeff Hinshaw,
I don't know who that
Cosmic
is.
Cousins. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he and I are just 2 days apart, so we have, like, all we down to the Virgo moon, we have, like, everything together.
I have a Gemini moon, but I envy the Virgo moon. I think
What do you envy about it?
because the problem with Gemini is that we just want to do is someone who tries really hard to like be a productive person. It's like
Mhm.
the combination of like the moon in Gemini and Mercury in Pisces is literally wanting to do all the things at once, like in every area of my life. Like I don't
Yeah.
know what like simplicity looks like. At least you have a moon that's going, okay, but one thing at a time, one thing at a time. I'm thinking that's maybe how it works.
Um, I think that Virgo has the capacity to feel anxiety about more than one thing at a time, but you are right about, like, trying to strip things down, but what usually happens, like, there's still that, like, over-promising, taking on too much, particularly for those
Yeah.
of us that have, like, Sag outer planets, and then that
Mhm.
like, I have a Sagittarius midheaven, so I'm like,
Mm,
"I can be 100 things at once," and then I, like, say yes to a lot of stuff, and then my Virgo moon, it, like, gets to the time to finish the stuff, and that's when it kicks into the, like, panic mode, strip away the inessential. It's like but, like, first I have to go through the whole, kind of self-flagellation process of being like, "Why did I say yes? Why did I think this would be easy? Why did I think I could do all this in 1 week?" And then I'm like, "Okay, this is what you have to do for tomorrow, and this is what you're actually getting paid for. That's what you will do."
mhm. I think we're both hearing a little bit of that, like that doom Mercury and Pisces. Like the Mercury and Pisces is just can feel like self-flagellation at times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Like all the
definitely.
thoughts. They're not
Yeah.
always
No, and mine is square my natal Saturn as well, so I'm also
good.
like,
Mhm,
"Oh, you dumbass."
mhm. Wait, you have Saturn,
I
can
have
I am I
Saturn
gonna
in
say this
Sag.
sentence? Okay,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
Mine's fine, I just lied. I, like, couldn't tell things. Mine's trine. Just wanna point that
Okay.
out there.
Alright, alright, alright. Yeah, yeah. It's a little different.
Yeah.
But I can see how you could flow into some real depression, self-flagellation, right? It's like just because the path is clear does not make it easier. In fact, removing the friction sometimes means that you never make a different choice or it's much harder to. There's that push, right? Like with the square, you're like, I guess I need to do something differently
Yeah.
if I want to stop feeling this way or thinking this about myself. Um, whether or not that always happens, you know.
I also have not to, like, talk too much about my chart, but we're astrologers, and I'll talk about it. I have a Saturn-Venus opposition, so the conversation needs to happen between, like, that conversation, which is a little, like they're kind of screaming at each other all the time. There's a little bit of shame with Saturn, and the only real mouthpiece in my chart is through that Mercury. So it's like, "Oh,
Right.
process this." It's a clear channel, but it's sometimes, like, it's not always the, most joyous channel.
Yeah, okay, okay, I see what you're saying. But it's a
Mhm.
drain nonetheless, right? Water follows gravity. You're
Speak
welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Speaking of, I've got see, with my birthday, I literally wanna do 2 I'm taking 2 paths at once. I'm holding one path of conversation
Mhm, mhm.
here, let me get it, okay, and then here, okay, so pick one hand and I'll go through that path. I mean, you can't really see left or right, so just pick 1 or 2.
I'm picking 2.
2. Okay, so now I have to remember what 2 was. Got it.
Cool.
Slap
We
them on
just
the head.
met, everyone.
So the home like, it's like I'm like homesteader, but, like, the whole, like, you live in a very small town, there's
Mhm,
not a lot of people, there's, like, a post office.
mhm.
Was this kind of part of a, like, I'm going to, like, escape humanity? I'm a little bit of, like, I don't like cities, or was this just, like, I really like prairie dogs? If it's not too personal, can I ask a little bit about, like, what precipitated this move?
Yeah, I mean, we were in New York City, ground zero for COVID,
Yeah.
and we came out here in January, end of December, January 2020. We landed on New Year's Eve, went straight to Bet Williams' house, actually,
Yeah.
and we were like, "We're gonna do this road trip." my partner and I had been together for 2.5 years at that point, and we were like, maybe it's starting to be time to end our time in New York. We don't know where we go, so why don't we like just take this 3-week trip and like drive around the Southwest and the West Coast and like figure out like, are any of these places where we might want to move in a few years? So we flew out to Santa Fe, spent New Year's in Cerritos. Then we like visited with some friends down in Albuquerque. Then we drove over to Tucson, and then we came to LA and like spent the last 10 days in LA. And we're just kind of like, oh, this is cute. Can we do this? Tucson's a little too hot. Oh, LA, maybe LA, but also LA is like just as expensive as New York.
Mhm.
And like, what are we changing except now we need to drive everywhere instead of like being in the place with like still kind of functioning public transportation in this country.
Yeah.
So we had it like in the back of our mind, and then COVID hit New York. And it's really hard to describe that experience to folks who weren't like, also bad in other major cities. Also, I know California was like pretty fucked as well, but like you could feel the death, you could smell it. There was this thing where like just fireworks going off all the time starting in like May. Everybody was on edge, and we were just like, okay, we were barely scraping by, but it was worth it for the amenities. And once those were stripped away, and then just kind of the intensity and overwhelm, it was kind of like, if we don't leave now, I don't know if we're ever going to get out. And we were also both of our leases were ending. And we were like, well, we want to move in together, but for the same cost of like putting a down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment, we could move across the country and like start over somewhere else. So we were like, you know what? If we find the right place, we'll know it's right and we'll go. And if we don't, God help us, right? And and Jenny found this out on Craigslist with no pictures. It was just like 1800s farmhouse in charming town or whatever. And we were like, well, let's check it out or whatever. And then we got a video. And then we were kind of, and it was like the kitchen was fucked up. And the guy was like, oh, well, we'll give you like a abated rent for a year if you redo the kitchen and this, that, and the other. And I was like crazed, losing my mind. And we were just like, yeah, fuck it. So we like signed a lease and moved across the country, never having seen the place. And then landed here, and we are like, okay, guess we'll figure this out. But like we had some extended community, and also like I grew up in this tiny college town and learned pretty quickly that like these two queer people who I literally knew when I was 15 lived 20 minutes from where we were moving. And then they introduced us to other people. So we have like this sweet little like built-in queer family community here, and like just beautiful sunsets. And it's hard. And also like I needed it. I'm a 12th house sun. I cannot be around that many people. A sponge.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, honestly. Feels really good.
I love that, of all people to get called to like the old farmhouse sight unseen. Of course, like you're a carpenter. That's like so perfect. Like if anyone is equipped to do the job, it's you, literally.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so we did it. And then I've been like doing odd jobs, and then also just building my astrology practice and doing editing and sound design work for podcasts. And so I like kind of like I canceled my insurance for my carpentry work last year as a like, let's try to push off from that. But push comes to shove, I may be back out there doing cabinets.
I is someone who like I struggle like putting up shelves. It is so I like to think I'm
Hard.
tough. I had a restaurant for a while, so I really like to like lift things for people, but like I can't chop wood, I can't hang shelves. I have so much envy of this.
That's why you need community, my friend.
Yeah. I love that. Like, but and that's fine. You can like you don't have to be you can still like trade your carpentry skills with those around you instead of like, yeah.
Yeah. And I've also like done consultations for friends, like literally through video calls. Like my friend Renee embodied astrology. Like she's called me up and I've helped her like on FaceTime replace a bathroom light, like go through like turning off the power, making sure everything's safe, rewiring it, putting it back in, installing the anchor. So it's like technology can help us as much as it's also hurting us.
Absolutely. Like maybe this is the pivot. Okay, so I'm going to explain. I think part of the
Mhm.
reason I asked that question in the first place,
Mhm.
again, there's like two choices, but I'm just going to throw them all at you at once. I think right now there's a lot of like voices in astrology that feel very like doom. You know, there's a big
Mm.
doomsayer moment, whether it's, just art, astrology. It's usually just like a dude who's just telling us how just the end is near.
Yeah.
Um and I think there's the like build a bunker sort of mentality. And so like that
Yeah.
can feel very oppressive, for people who are like, but I like cities, I like communities. I don't want to
Yeah.
just like go and like, you know, hide from everyone.
Yeah.
Um, but it feels your reasons for moving were very different. And it feels, in fact, that you found community. You aren't trying to just like be in a bunker. I mean, that's great too.
Yeah. No, but it's not, right? Like, what a striking lack of imagination that that's the best you can come up with. And like, what's the point of surviving if it's a world that like you can't leave your house and you're paranoid all the time? Like, that's the best we can come up with. These like brilliant dude, like, yeah, Zuckerberg, you're gonna fucking like build a fortress on half of Hawaii. Like, what if a volcano hits you? Like, what are you gonna do? You have no friends and you probably don't know how to do anything for yourself. So I just feel like that is like using the same tools that are getting us that have gotten us here, right?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and I don't know. When I look around, I'm like, we gotta try something different. We have to. This cannot be the pinnacle of achievement. Like it just can't be. Like I refuse. You refuse. Like, no.
Yeah. Yes, and yes, and yes. And also just like if I don't know, if I was in like my bunker and like the world gets destroyed and like I hopped out and even say I had like, I don't know, like a couple close people near me, I would be like so sad. I'm like, this is it. Like, I really need the world to thrive. Like, I
Yeah.
like going and seeing people and knowing there are strangers and the whole collection. Like, that would just be so
Yeah.
devastating.
Yeah. And it also, a thing that I really appreciate with where I live now and the way that I live my life is I'm having an easier time recognizing that interconnection. And I think that people can find that in all kinds of different places. But for me, like the capacity to distract myself was too great to like actually notice and nurture connection. But yeah, if I stepped out of my bunker and it's just like gray skies, no more prairie dogs or butterflies, like no flowers to smell, no people just tinkering, doing whatever weird shit they're doing. Or yeah, some like weird old man at the hardware store who wants to tell you about his second wife. Like, like I agree that like the things that make the world magical, it's kind of like, do you have those friends who like you'll watch end of the world shows with, like zombie shows, and you'll be like, okay, but would you get bit by the zombies or would you spend your life like trying to avoid that?
Oh, I've never asked that question. I don't watch too much television, but now I'm thinking about this.
That's
What is your
wise.
answer?
I think that the anxiety would overwhelm. I think at first I would get really into it and then I just get burnt out and be like, fuck it, just take me. Cause again, it's like, what are we trying to survive? Like, what's the end game here? If the end game is living in nuclear winter, eating like freeze dried food for the rest of my life, like, no, thank you.
I
I
I,
need
I correct that.
sun.
I did watch like years ago, like a season of The Waking Dead or a couple seasons.
Mhm.
And I still remember the sort of anxiety that produced in my body. Like,
Right?
it's always anxious. I'm anxious if people don't call me. If I had to live every day wondering if a zombie was going to bite me, like, I would just have a panic attack that did me in. Like, there's no way.
Exactly. It just isn't sustain or like, yeah, there's that Cormac McCarthy book, The Road, and it's like you're just walking
Yeah.
through nuclear fallout trying to keep an 11-year-old child alive, like pushing a wheelbarrow. Will people set traps to cannibalize your body? Like, no, thank you. So, yeah, I'd rather try to find a way to to not resort to that. I also like, let's be real, I'm not a fucking billionaire. Like, there's no like, what could I stockpile? Like maybe 2 weeks. That's it. So like, I just like that can't be my out. It just like I need to be able to talk to strangers and have a good time. Like that to me feels like a stronger survival skill.
Yeah. I'm just like, what would you have in your bunker? Like, have you ever and, like, even thinking about, like, the, like, 1950s bunkers, they're, like, underground. Like, I also have a fear of closed spaces. That alone would give
Yes.
me a panic attack.
Yeah.
Like,
No
oh,
daylight? No.
yeah.
No.
Like, it
Un
feels like you're kind of, like, intentionally being buried alive.
Yeah, it's terrible. Like, you might as well just be stuck in an elevator for the rest of your life. Like, it just is like, I don't yeah, I'm just like, "Come on, we can do better." We can, absolutely. We have to, figure out how to work with each other to do that, but I think part of it too is, like, we don't need to be best friends to, like, move towards a collective goal, you know? Like, I don't need to share a kitchen with you, but we could share some land. That would be cool, you
Mhm,
know?
mhm.
You can put the toilet paper how you want in your bathroom, and I'll do it how I you know what I mean? Like, I think that actually distance can make us closer if we have shared goals and, like, respect for autonomy.
Speaking of, is there, like, a sort of shared land situation happening where you are in, New Mexico? Like, can we
There
still do the tiny house dream? Can I move towards you?
I think you could, yeah. I think it's possible, and, that's something that we're kind of trying to figure out and investigate as elder millennials who are like, "What can I what can I afford?" As as everything's become like a McMansion. I saw, like, in Taos, there's, like, a one-bedroom, one-bath going for over $300,000. It's like a 500 square foot cabin, and I'm like, "Guys, what are we doing here? This is absurd." So I do think that dream can still happen, and I also know that does not always work, and part of the reason it doesn't work is because people we bring the problems we're trying to avoid to whatever we're doing, right? So it's like there's so what's happening?
I'm sorry, read the comments. I apologize. This is Carl says toilet
Toilet paper.
paper goes and only, and you will be judged.
And, Carl, you are right, and it's over. By the way, it's not under. But the point is I am willing to be tolerant enough. I'm willing to, like, really embody my most Jupiterian aspirational characteristics and allow people to be wrong in the privacy of their own home or their own shack, right?
I'm gonna, like, throw a loop. I have never once in my life thought about which way the toilet paper goes. Like, I am so just mutable that I just do it whatever way it comes out. Like, what and I know that I drive people mad.
That's very, that checks out. That checks out for a lot of mutability for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, um, yeah, Virgo is, like, the most undercover about the chaos, but definitely
Mhm.
it liveth. Especially if you have a Virgo friend who's starting to try to, like, fix your life, a friend with strong Virgo placements, and they're like, "I can fix you, I can help you," probably means that their life is in shambles right now.
Yes. Yes, I can attest to this, and they can almost be mean the way they do it, and you're like, you're
Yeah.
like I'm like, "You're giving me self-help advice, you're being really kind of angry, and I know you're going through something, but you're never gonna talk about that, so you're just gonna, like, make me feel judged and, like, give me this, like, very, like, hard." I'm gonna say it's just, like, feels like very, like, Dolly Parton, like, 9 to 5, but then, like, me.
Yes. Yes. Yes,
Real
to
life.
which we say, "Physician, heal thyself," you know? That's that's the medicine, and I say that with love as a Virgo moon hover. I do know. When I started being a real bitch at jobs that I was working at, I was like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
need to leave this job. I am Ms. here." Like, it's obscene. I gotta go because I do not like who I'm being here, which means I'm not happy. I'm not getting what I need. You don't appreciate all the things I quietly do.
Yeah, mhm, mhm.
Guilty.
So I'm going to try to keep some semblance of being a host here, and I want to ask you
Good
two
luck.
questions. We can roll through this, but I want to ask how
Mhm.
you go from being a carpenter to an
Mhm.
astrologer, and then I also want to get to your podcast. So
Yeah.
choose where you want to start.
Well, the carpentry astrology thing, both actually stem from my father. He was a contractor and an astrologer. So I grew up around both. I grew up with my dad telling me like that my ankle hurt because I'm an Aquarius sun. You know what I mean? Like there's literally a video of me at 4 years old where that conversation happens with him. And I remember like him teaching me how to hold a paintbrush or like hammer in nails and how to chop wood. So my dad basically like
You can
between the
chop wood.
yes. Yeah. And I need to sometimes. Though you can buy wood pre-split and it usually is like worth it. Cause it'd be like 30 extra dollars. And you're like, this is days of work for me. Like, no, no, thank you. Cause we go through like, yeah, we go through a lot of wood. That's the whole point. It's our main source of heat. So
Will you teach
um
me if I visit you?
for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, you can continue on. Sorry, I got really excited.
No,
Chop
it's
wood. It's
fine. So there's this way where my life is just a series of returning to things that I like did as a kid or was around, like played a lot of music. I was around building stuff and like just thought it was had my little tool belt and would like tool around as a child. And then also kind of grew up steeped in astrology and then um just kind of wound my way there. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went to college for theater for lighting and then was like, this is terrible. But then I like got work in the wood shop and then I moved to New York and was like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but this is where all the hot gay people live. So I moved here. And then a friend was like, can you use the table saw? And I was like, kind of. And then she was like, you can work at this place then. And so I started building like sets and props and window displays and always kind of like 1 foot in astrology and then was in bands for a while and was like in this punk band for like 12 years and like but there was this way where like I would like think things weren't for me anymore and then they would keep cropping up and so that all kind of happened and then I hit my Saturn return and everything in my life started collapsing and I do think that this is kind of the Saturn and Sagittarius journey, the like party animal to philosopher kind of route, you know what I mean? Where it's like so it's like you want to take it to the edge outside and then you're like, "Oh, actually the edge is inside." Like, "Oh, I am the mountain or whatever." Um and so as things kind of collapsed and like some pretty fucked up stuff happened and people and myself included navigating pretty harmful relationships to substances, like I was like, I need to focus energy, time, attention on something else. I'm also getting really burnt out building essentially trash, right? Like it's like building window displays that get used for a few weeks and then end up in a dumpster and like inhaling MDF dust. And so I just started to I turned to astrology in like literally my darkest hour in my Saturn return and started studying more seriously because I was like, you know what? Like this keeps cropping up. I do really love it. I am a person who's like decent enough at math too. Like I have the right brain for it, but then I also have been like a songwriter like my whole life. So I was like, oh, words and symbols. Wait, it doesn't have to rhyme? Wow, I feel free.
Yeah.
And so it ended up, there were probably 3 or 4 years where I was studying pretty seriously, from probably, like, 2015 or 2016 to 2019, where it's, like, literally I would go to work at this shop and build sets with, like, whatever thick-ass astrology book and then spend every break, like, studying astrology. And, um, and then I found a mentor, and they were like, this is ridiculous. Like, you just need to start doing readings. Here's where you should charge, and you can take my old clients because I'm becoming a therapist. Because I definitely was like, hell, I can't start till it's perfect. And they were like, buddy, like, come on. You have everything memorized. Like, you just gave me a great cold reading. Like, don't be an asshole. And yeah, beef up your counseling skills. If you're gonna study further, like think about kind of ethical framework for your practice and like put your focus and attention there and then just keep studying. But like I don't think you like need me to teach you how to be a thing you kind of already are. And then, yeah, I got together with my partner 6.5 years ago. And she also was like, "What are you doing? Here, I'll show you how to set up a website." And the rest is her story, my story. But in there, my friend Gala Mukamalova, who used to write the nylon horoscopes,
Okay.
probably 4 or 5 years ago, and had the Galactic Rabbit horoscopes blog.
Yeah.
She and I started because she was friends with Jenny, and we actually used to go to Michigan Women's Music Festival in our as teenagers. So we like met as teens and then like didn't see each other for a long time. And then I showed up for the third date with Jenny and Gala was there. And then this other person was like, "Oh, I think you know this person is gonna move into my house." And this other couple came in and I was like, "Oh, I had you over for dinner with my old roommate." So it just became clear that we had this overlap. And then we just started like hanging out. And every time we'd hang out, 30 or 40 minutes in, it would just be me and Gala in the corner talking about astrology. And so then we're like, if we were men, we would already have a podcast. So we started Big Dyke Astrology or Big Dyke Energy in 2018. And so that was kind of how I started podcasting. And then I started my podcast this last fall. And then
Okay.
in between that, I used to edit Moonbeaming for Sarah Gottesdiener. I used to do Annabelle Gatt's Patreon podcast. And now I'm doing sound design for this woman, Dana Balicki's podcast, Crying in My Jacuzzi. Um,
I love
she
that
was like,
title. I've never heard this, but I love that.
it's pretty fun. I mean, she basically was like Pee Wee Herman is one of my biggest inspirations, and I was like, "Am I hire me?" Like, I just took the squeaker out of this dog toy, and I'm saving it in a drawer for your podcast. So, so that's how all of those things happened. Is
I
that?
love it. And where you mentioned where did you grow up? You said a small college town.
I grew up in Ohio near Antioch College. So if you know anybody who went to Antioch College between like 2002 to 2005 or 6, I probably actually like 2000 to 2005, I probably know them.
I think I know like one girl and she like moved to Germany. I can't remember her name. It's like I'm Ancient. That's a long time ago. I'm from
Let me
Detroit,
look
so it's
them.
not that far.
Ah, not that far. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you know about like the 10 p.m. sunset summer thing too.
Mhm.
Mhm. On that
Yeah.
edge. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay, so much, so much. So there's a question. For you, like why so we learn okay, so we get this sort of you become obsessed with astrology, you get
Yeah,
a mentor, you fall in with these astrologers, you start doing this podcasts, right? So it's been sort of
yeah.
multiple, you're doing all these things, but at the core of it, we could bring it back.
Mhm.
What about astrology, right? Like, what really resonates with you? Like, why do you
Mm,
and like, what do you think? It's interesting. You also mentioned therapy, right? Your mentor going into therapy. Like, what do you think the
yeah.
function of astrology is? Hmm.
I think that astrology can function the way that, psychedelics can function as far as, like, the relationship to theory I mean, to
Yeah.
therapy, right? It's like, there's a way where, one session or seeing somebody once a year who's, like, a good skilled astrologer can kind of, leapfrog years and years of talk therapy, right? There's a way where somebody can see you, validate your experience, and then give you other options for using the energy. And I think, I've always loved language. My mom's an English teacher and a poet also, right? So it's like I kind of grew up with like this perfect storm. Like it's wild that it actually took me till my early 30s to be like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Cause in a way it was like just the water that I was like the amniotic fluid that I was in as a child. But I think with astrology, it's twofold. Part of it is the resonance is for me, it's about like reconnecting to these cycles that before we were kind of wrenched out of the natural rhythms of existence by industrialization, colonialism, like you name it, right? Like there's a lot of things that happen in the last few thousand years, right? Like some would argue since the age of Aries, right? It's like the Bronze Age once we had more powerful weapons. Some people are like, no, 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 everything got bad with agriculture. So maybe it's the age of Taurus, whatever. The point is, we do know that there are other ways of living and being, and that it seems like feeling connected to those rhythms is soothing. Knowing that there is an expiration date on a feeling or an experience is really soothing. And so I think it's partly that. But I also feel like the first time I had like a decent astrology reading, that person saw all the things that I was insecure about, that I thought were wrong with me, that I thought were problems, and found a way to reframe them that actually made me feel like I had a lot more choice and agency. And so knowing that that is possible
Yeah.
feels really good. And then the other side of it is I think that there's a lot of catching up to do as far as the diversity of voices and experiences in astrology. And I like am so thrilled about like who is getting louder and having more influence and range these days. Like it's just so much more interesting to me because I'm sure you have this experience as well. Like there's some authors who I'm like, wow, you're brilliant, and like you're really not leaning too heavily on some like pretty harmful um binaries and like kind of sexist tropes, to be honest. And also, like, there are so many books that should be written that don't exist yet. So I think it's also this idea of like, wow, there's a lot of people who could really benefit from astrology as a liberatory lens and as a symbolic language that lets us kind of rearrange our existing conditions to find something more hopeful, who just don't think it's for them because of the ways that it's been presented. Like, I was going I was gonna sign up to take the ISAR certification, and
Yeah.
the first practice question asked me how I would interpret a moon placement for a man, and then how I would interpret it for a woman. And I was like, actually, no, I'm not fitting into this. Like, this is
Wow.
so wild. And I was like, in this big year, this is what you're doing still?
This is recent. I mean, this is recently.
This was
I mean,
recently.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna sound so controversial here, and this is gonna sound so shady. But like, I don't know, Isar, maybe that's the reason you're like, as an organization, like struggling for funds. That's a whole larger conversation of
It
like
is.
what what communities look like in the Pluto and Aquarius moment. But
Yeah,
we
it's
we've been
true.
that for some time.
But yeah, I'm just kinda like, you know what? And I just think about, like, going back to therapy, like, how much more impactful something can be, how much more healing, how much less, I don't wanna go whole hog here. I'm not gonna say traumatic, but, like, how kind of alienating
Mhm.
an experience can be if you go in immediately feeling defensive or on edge, or like this person isn't going to see you, isn't going to be able to reflect back your experience, isn't going to just like look at you and be like, you exist. I don't have all of these assumptions based upon like what I've decided your genitals at birth were, also, which is like a nuts way to go through the world and talk to people. Like, it's wild. And you can extend that to all kinds of alternative communities too, right? Like assumptions that like a moon sign or a nadir is like a happy place, that it's like necessarily tied to safety. Assumptions about whether somebody is poly or monogamous or you know what I mean? Like there are all these ways that are baked into kind of the cookbook interpretations that just like don't leave room for like honestly 90% of the world. That's the wildest part, is like this isn't normal. This is what's convenient to the current dominant global power structure. Like there's so many other iterations, you know?
Yeah, there's I'm going to try to frame this correctly and bear with me here. But an acquaintance of mine who's like academic, every time I run into her, she's sort of aired that, while she, enjoys astrology, like she has this problem because she thinks this specifically, it's like for queer people that astrology has become this sort of like, how do we fix ourselves and can kind of be sort of damaging.
Yeah.
And, and I, thinking about that, I think it's not astrology. I think it's the sort of culture around astrology, right? I even think about, I study a lot of like, traditional, that's sort of my Hellenistic background.
Yeah.
I have friends who are way more scholarly than me. And what I kind of like, if you go back that far, it's like, yeah, there's like, these authors are sort of like, making their assumptions about Venus. But at the end of the day, it is just like that you get down to it as being like a clock. And any sort of
Yeah.
meaning, we do that. We give the meaning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, but there's something really, to me, at the core, beautiful about that. I don't know if you've had an experience. I did this week where something really terrible is happening. By the way, I have my astrology mentor and my therapist on the same day. This is beautiful. I always tell. And if I'm going through something really bad, it's like
Yeah.
really bad. Like, oh my God, it's like my mentors. I'm just like sobbing and figuring this out. But there's something really gorgeous about being like, oh shit, I can see the planets. I know what's going on. I'm not going crazy. It's going to move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, I know I just threw a lot of things at you, but I don't know. Have you had a moment like that? Do you feel the same way about how astrology is used, not used?
Yeah, I think that it's a tool. And so
Yeah.
it's really like you can do a lot of damage with a hammer.
Mm-hmm. You
And
should
you can
know.
also I know, I definitely know. And so I think that that's part of it. I also think that for me,
Yeah.
any kind of healing work, it's not about a cure, it's about trying to help people feel whole. And feeling whole isn't about changing who you are. It's actually about calling back to yourself the parts that you thought didn't fit or that you had to kind of push to the side to get through, right? Like so much of how we move in the world at some point was about survival. And for some of us, that never goes away. But but to me, I actually think it's quite the opposite. It's so much less about fixing yourself. It's learning that like every wince also comes with like an opportunity for relief. Like every difficult, challenging placement also shows you a part of yourself that has a certain resilience or some kind of other talent. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to Pollyanna this, but I also don't think there's such a thing as a bad placement. I think they all have skills that come like wrapped up with the challenges. And I think that a skilled astrologer, a mindful astrologer is going to help you see A, the ways that thing helped you stay alive, and B, different ways to integrate it or to appreciate it in a different light. Because that's the thing about symbol, right? All the mythology about all of the gods and deities that bring us language and symbol, as soon as we can name something or use language or identify something, condense its meaning down, it means that we have all of a sudden more possibilities, right? You hear like these myths, like foxes are considered clever because they make multiple entrances to their den, right?
Yeah.
And
I didn't know
so
that.
and so I'm kind of like, I don't know, a symbolic language, if you're not using it to find a back door, if you're not using it to find the slipstream, you're not using it to its full potential.
Is that something? No, I love that. Like, do you remember kind of, it's coming back from you, and we'll sort of round this out, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you remember a moment like when you were studying astrology where you kind of like in your own life sort of found that like slipstream where you're like, oh, actually astrology is showing me a different way to like reimagine my life. It's not just the study of astrology.
Wow. That's wow, that's really beautiful. Yeah, actually, it was with my Mercury in Pisces. It's like this feeling of misunderstanding, and then some being like, "Yeah, but you have Mercury in Pisces in your 12th house, and it's trine Pluto and Scorpio in the 8th. So, like, sure, you may be misunderstood in like the mundane world, but like you can sit with somebody for 5 minutes and probably pick up most of like whatever they've been going through, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that was one of those ones, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, I love that because you have, um oh, so yeah, so Saturn and Sag, yeah, so it's squaring that, which is interesting. So thinking about like that really
Mhm.
coming alive during your Saturn return.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because it's stimulated, right? And then it wants somewhere to
Mhm,
go. Similar to how you were talking about your Mercury Saturn with that Venus
mhm,
Saturn opposition. Like I have this T
mhm.
square to Mercury, which like, yeah, I felt like my thoughts were very chaotic, but I did know that I could write songs, right? But like, ooh, term papers, hard. Creative
This
nonfiction, great, love it, right? And so again, it was that like, oh, no, 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 I am good at stuff, but I'm not gonna fit into an assembly line very well. I'm not gonna fit into like academia very well. Like that's not where I belong and that's fine.
I still have nightmares that people I also studied English literature, and
Mhm.
I have nightmares that people are going to take my college degree away. Like, no matter that I've never actually used it, but I did earn it, and it took me a long time, and I just have dreams that they're, like, taking it away. Like, you have to do this again because it was so
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Yeah, I have that about high school and college. And like college, there was like this one stupid like computer drafting class that I barely passed. And it was just because it was taught by a grad student who was like, it's fine. Like, I'm not gonna tell you you can't graduate. You've already expressed you don't want to do this for a living. But yeah, I have dreams where I'm like going to the registrar's office and it's like it's too late to drop the class I haven't been going to, which like but that's that Saturn in the ninth, I guess, for me,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Those big fears about institutions imposing their authority upon me.
Yeah. I've
Yep.
I've Mars there, so it's a malefic conversation that I can get behind. I just wanna, like,
Yeah.
blow them off. Not not literally everyone, just so we know. Just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you need to clarify,
We absolutely.
these days.
This, this is so much fun. Okay, I'm gonna round
Mhm.
this out because 'cause I'm gonna be respectful of
Yeah,
time. I love
yeah,
this conversation so much. I just wanna, like,
yeah,
thank you. And,
yeah.
like, what do you have going on? Like, how can people find you? All the things.
Yeah, so, one easy free way to find me is through my newsletter, which you can sign up for at my website, or through my Instagram. It's super easy. There's a little link, and that goes out at least twice a month, sometimes a little more. I also have a podcast, Mutual Reception, which is part interview podcast and part forecast. So every new moon and full moon, I send out a newsletter, and then do a companion podcast that for people who would rather listen than read, because I
Mhm.
understand sometimes you're like get a little cross-eyed, right? Like reading like transit after transit. And so each one of those has like a little essay intro and then about whatever I'm feeling. And then that. And then I also like make a playlist that I send out with it that sometimes is on theme and sometimes is just like, this is what I've been into lately. And the other thing is my partner, Jenny, I do that because her office is through the wall, so I'm always like, "Oh, Jenny, she's not in there." Her name on Instagram is Corpus Ritual. Looks like you have a
Okay,
remedy there?
I do. I was
Yeah.
recommended to get something when I was having bad panic attacks. I can attest to it.
Is it Panic Bloom?
This one is, this is, adrenal and nervous system exhaustion and depression.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm the
Good.
worst. I don't even know what I'm taking. I'm like, "Those things sound like me all the time. I'll take it. Done."
Anyway, she and I are doing a an equinox breathwork and astrology workshop that's sliding scale on Zoom on Tuesday the 19th. So we'll get together, I'll ground us into the solstice, give some writing prompts, and then she will lead us in a breathwork practice to kind of metabolize the information for folks who kind of boop, dial tone when somebody's just
Yeah,
talking data. So it should be really fun. And
I love
otherwise you
that.
can book with me.
I'm excited about all the things. The 19th sounds so much fun.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah,
doesn't? Especially going into this eclipse season, I think we all need to learn how to get some breath work done.
yeah, we need a little refresh, we need a little purge, we gotta move some shit because it's gonna just really start. It already feels like a lot, and it's not gonna stop feeling like a lot. It's just gonna feel even faster. So I
Mhm.
feel like, yeah, a little recharge, a little clearing, I think would be good. I think it'd be fun. I'm excited about it.
I'm excited about it.
Great.
I just
Maybe
learned
I'll
about
see you.
it. Yay. Okay. Okay. So officially, this has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Vivi Henriette of Art of the Zodiac. Everyone subscribe to my podcast, my podcast and my Substack, where I did a mini interview with you. I just released it today. Super excited
Oh, I
about.
just
So,
signed up.
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
You know Bets. You can read that interview, which I loved.
Yeah. 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 That's a trip.
Bet
That
Williams.
book is, yeah. Yeah. She actually wrote a memoir about like being a queer teenager that I found as a queer teenager, girl walking backwards, because I used to go to the library and type in lesbian into the computer search engine. So that's actually I found that book when I was like 14. And then when I found out that Jenny was like talking to her on Instagram, I was like, what?
So cute.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. But yeah.
Oh my God. Did you read the interview? It's so good.
Not
I will
yet.
only push an interview I do because it's not me talking, right? I don't like that seems like extra, but she's amazing. That interview is amazing. Everyone read it.
Yeah.
Listen to the podcast. Bet Williams, Talk with me, Vivi Henriette. Look at me plug myself. And Mutable Cross,
Good.
is that the name of your website too to follow in all the places? Is it Mutable Cross? And it's Rose Blakelock.
It's roseblakelock.com and then Mutable Cross on Instagram. And then I left the bad place because I was like getting too riled up. I was too chaotic on Twitter. I had to leave.
I never went on Twitter. It's too my brain can't handle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that was wise of you.
I do some things right sometimes. Okay. Have a gorgeous evening.
You too. It was so nice to meet you and talk to you tonight. And I look forward to keeping up with each other's work.
Absolutely. I'm going to end the stream.